Imagine a city. It had neither a great army, nor vast lands, nor natural resources. It only had a swamp, a few islands, and incredible intelligence, and it built the most cleverly designed trade empire in the world. This empire was Venice. The story of Venice is actually a story of desperation. In the 5th century AD, as the Roman Empire collapsed, barbarians coming from the north devastated the Italian peninsula. Some of the people fled to the coast, and from there to the marshy islets in the middle of the lagoon. These islets were unusable for agriculture. It was impossible to find valuable minerals, and they couldn't even be considered defensible land. But they had one huge feature. They were surrounded by water on all sides. And over time, this disadvantage would turn into the greatest advantage in the world. The first Venetians made a living through fishing and salt production. And salt was not something to underestimate in those years, because without salt, it was impossible to preserve food, and it had serious value in trade. But the Venetians didn't stop there. They learned to read the sea, they learned shipbuilding, and most importantly, they learned how to trade. In the 8th and 9th centuries, Europe was fragmented, poor, and made up of feudal states hostile to one another. In the east, there was the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. Silk, spices, glass, precious metals. A bridge was needed between east and west. Venice was built right on that bridge. Venice's first major move was establishing good relations with the Byzantine Empire. At that time, Byzantium was the greatest economic power in the Mediterranean. Constantinople was one of the most populous and wealthiest cities in the world. The Venetians remained loyal to Byzantium, but this was not just a matter of loyalty. It was a conscious strategy. Under Byzantine protection, Venetian merchants could freely enter the empire's ports. Over time, these privileges expanded. In 992, Venice began receiving special trade rights from Byzantium. They could trade at much lower taxes than other merchants, almost tax-free. This may seem like a small privilege, but thanks to it, they could sell goods much cheaper than their competitors. Over time, they wiped their rivals out of the market. How did Venice obtain this privilege? By using its naval power extremely well. It provided naval support to Byzantium. In essence, it was saying, "You are strong on land, we are strong at sea. Together, we are better." This partnership worked for both sides, until Venice reached the power it had planned. If you want to understand Venice's real secret, you need to look at the arsenal. The arsenal was Venice's state shipyard, and a type of production facility the world had never seen before. Ships were built there almost like on an assembly line. Standard parts, standard processes, standard quality. In the 15th century, the arsenal's capacity was astonishing. It could build a fully equipped warship in a single day. In just one day, complete and ready for battle. When King Henry III of France visited Venice in 1574, arsenal workers built a galley from scratch in front of him while he was eating, and by the time the meal was over, the ship was ready. The king was stunned. This was not a show to impress the king. It was proof to the world of what Venice was capable of. Ships were being produced cheaper, faster, and with higher quality. And these ships expanded Venice's trade network. The trade network generated more income. More income meant more ships. The cycle fed itself. Perhaps the most critical moment in Venice's rise was during the Crusades. Venice's approach in this period reveals its commercial intelligence in its purest form. The Crusades, which began in 1096, were military campaigns organized by Europe to reclaim the Holy Lands from Muslims. Did Venice feel religious enthusiasm? Maybe a little. But what it really felt was opportunity. Crusader armies had to transport soldiers by sea, and for that, ships were needed. And Venice had ships. Venice signed highly profitable contracts to meet this need. It transported soldiers, provided supplies, and offered port services. But beyond that, it added clauses to every agreement to gain commercial privileges. The European states organizing the Crusades had no choice but to accept these conditions. This allowed Venice to secure a port right in Syria, a trade quarter in Palestine, and a warehouse in Cyprus. Every crusade expanded Venice's trade network one step further. And then, in 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, the world witnessed one of the strangest events in history. Instead of the Holy Lands, the Crusaders sacked Constantinople. How did this happen? Thanks to the genius of Venice's leader at the time, the old, experienced, and nearly blind Doge Enrico Dandolo. The Crusader army was in debt to Venice. They couldn't pay for the ships. Dandolo used this debt as leverage. First, he had them capture the city of Zara on the Dalmatian coast and tie it to Venice. Then, he directed the army toward Constantinople. When the city was looted, Venice took the most valuable share: strategic ports, islands, and trade routes. The 4 bronze horses still standing today in St. Mark's Square are a reminder of that day. After the Fourth Crusade, Venice had truly become a maritime empire. It controlled key points in the Adriatic, Aegean, and Eastern Mediterranean. Cyprus, Crete, dozens of strategic islands and ports. These were not taken for land, but for trade. Every port was a foothold, every island a depot and refueling point. Another secret of Venice that many people don't know was information. Venetian merchants were spread all over the world, from Constantinople to Cairo, from Damascus to Alexandria. And these merchants were not just buying and selling goods. In every state they visited, they worked like agents. They reported everything they saw, heard, and learned back to Venice. These reports, sent regularly to the Senate, were actually one of the world's first organized intelligence systems. Which country is facing famine? Which spice is abundant this year? Which ruler is weakening? Which war is approaching? When Venetian merchants knew this, they could act before their rivals. And in the world of trade, information was as valuable as gold. In addition, Venice established a smart system to keep foreign merchants in the city. Structures called fondaco were controlled areas where foreign merchants both resided and conducted trade. There was the Fondaco dei Tedeschi for German merchants, and a separate fondaco for Turkish merchants. In this way, Venice both benefited from foreign trade and kept it under control. Who bought what, who sold to whom, at what price, everything was recorded. Venice had already laid the foundations of modern government bonds in those years. In emergencies like war, the state would forcibly borrow money from its citizens, but would pay interest in return. Over time, these compulsory loans became tradable. This was one of the seeds of the modern bond market, and even the logic of the stock exchange. Bringing it to today, the foundations of modern stock markets and bonds emerged thanks to Venice's clever plans around the 1204s. If this video inspired you and added something to your knowledge, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video. See you in the next one.